Hey everybody. I am a friend of Jackie's. My name is Rey Roldan. I'm a publicist and I started my own company probably in 2004, so it's been going around for 16 years. But I've been a publicist since 1995. I was a journalist up in Boston for a long time. Wrote for a number of publications called Boston Rock, Boston Globe, which was the newspaper, Boston Herald. I started my own publication called the Improper Bostonian. That was back in 1991, and it was a rag pretty much. It was like it started out as maybe a 20, 30 page newspaper that came out every 2 weeks, and we would actually cover things that went on in Boston, and that's that was where I really became a journalist per se. Like I was writing for a number of different fanzines and online publications back in the day. Um, but the Improper Bostonian was where I got my start. And from there, I started writing for a number of other publications, such as Boston Rock, as I mentioned, Boston Herald, Boston Phoenix. I wrote one or two articles for Boston Globe, which is a huge newspaper up there. And I started a few other magazines over the years. Um, but after a while, I was living in Boston, as I mentioned, and the problem was back then I wasn't making that much money. I was probably making maybe $13,000 to $14,000 a year, and back then it was a good amount of money. I mean, that's nothing, but back then, um, you could get by. But I kind of really needed a bit more to be able to survive. So I decided to pack my things, move down from Boston back down to New Jersey, and moved in with my parents for a little while. And you kind of have to suck up some of your pride to be able to move back home when you're 25, 26 years old. But I did it, and I got to the music industry, and I had a lot of friends. So I will admit that. I had a little bit of help getting into the industry. I had friends who worked for record labels who were journalists, who not really journalists but were publicists themselves, who I used to work with as a journalist, and they helped me find my first few jobs, and and it went from there. I'll get into that as when I answer some of these questions that you guys sent me. But now, with my own company, Raby, it's the full name is Another Raby Production, but it's called Raby Inc. for short. We've been running it for, as I mentioned, since 2004, so 16 years now, and we worked with a ton of different artists, a lot of artists that are mostly from the rock world, but I've done classical artists, I do a lot of rap and hip hop. I also do a lot of dance music, a lot of goth, country music. We've worked pretty much every style of music that's out there, and we've actually been rather successful with it. Yeah, let's get into some of these questions. So, first question is, what made you change from being a journalist to a publicist? Were you happy at the time with this change? Um, I think I might have mentioned that when I lived in Boston as a journalist, I was only making roughly about like maybe $12,000 to $14,000 a year. So not a really like not a huge salary, but it was a salary nonetheless, and it was good when I lived there. I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed being a journalist. I was out maybe 5, 6 nights a week. Because I also reviewed like restaurants, I was getting free meals, free lunches, free dinners, with the hopes that these restaurant owners would get a restaurant review from me. A lot of times I did review these restaurants, but I was kind of living large. Boston's a small city, so me being the editor of a big newspaper, a big magazine up there, I got carte blanche of everything. When I wanted to go see a concert. They saw me walking towards the door. They opened the doors and said, come on in. When I wanted to go to a restaurant, if there was, a line to get in, they saw me. They would actually say, here's a table. I was actually really fortunate in that way. The problem is, finances. I wasn't really making that much money. So I thought, maybe if I got into the music industry, it would actually afford me some more money. But I've always wanted to get into the music industry. I've always wanted to be somehow more attached to it than just being an active listener or being a journalist. I wanted to create jobs. I wanted to create stars. I wanted to be um, in the midst of, like, the artistic and creative field. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, wanting to be in the mix and hanging out with celebrities was a big part of it. But that was the only part. Like, I kind of wanted to help people um, create. I wanted to help people become big. I wanted to help people reach the audiences that they always wanted. So my change from journalist to publicist was one out of economics, financial, and that kind of thing. But it was also a what drove me was to, as I mentioned, I wanted to help people become stars. I wanted to help people be big. I wanted musicians to get their stories out there. Because as a journalist, your role is to get the story. But as a publicist, your role is to give that narrative, to give the story, to help the musicians actually tell who they are and what they're all about. So there's a little bit of excitement there, and a lot of perks. Hanging out with celebrities is always, like I mentioned, a really fun thing. But yeah, I mean, that was essentially why I went from a journalist to publicist. Was I happy with the change? Hard to say. It the first few years that I got in the music industry were I'm not going to say were difficult, but they were. There's a lot of grunt work. I was an intern. I was lucky that I only interned for maybe 2 months at a really terrible soundtrack company called Milan Records. They still exist, so don't quote me there. But they were putting out these soundtracks of films like Benny and June and Stargate and Freddy Krueger's New Nightmare. Not exactly like record-breaking soundtracks, but well, actually that's not true. Benny and June went platinum or multiple platinum, which is selling 1 million records, which a lot of bands don't do anymore. We'll get into that later. But yeah, a lot of the soundtracks that we did were for terrible movies, and they didn't sell well, but it was experience. I got to learn how to put together a press release properly. I learned how to talk to journalists and how to take orders, because when you're working your way through the music industry, you gotta learn how to play the game. It is a game to be able to know what you're doing. So I wasn't necessarily happy at first, but the more I got to learn the job and learn to be a publicist, it became a lot more exciting. It became a lot more fun, and it's still fun to this day. One of the things I love about being a publicist is that I really enjoy it. I really enjoy going to concerts. I really enjoy talking to artists. I really enjoy learning their stories and being creative and making their stories come alive, and yeah, I mean, it's fun. Two, this is for Princess McKay. Was it hard for you at first when you started out in the industry? Well, as I mentioned, when I first started the industry, I was an intern. And back then, the internet was still something brand new. We had to send packages, we had to send CDs, and a lot of the job was packing envelopes. I wasn't being I wasn't actually in the midst of a lot of artists back then. It was actually sitting in an office, making photocopies, stuffing CDs in envelopes, putting postage on these envelopes, and bringing these big bins of mail to the post office. And it was kind of demeaning. I was a 25-year-old, should have known better, should have had a better job at the time. But I was determined. I wanted to get in the industry, and an internship was the first way to do it. And these days, thankfully everything's done through the internet. If you want to send somebody like music, you don't have to send them the CD. You can just send them a download. But yeah, it was difficult. I mean, the first few jobs maybe the first 2 jobs I had were difficult, and because it was a lot of grunt work, it was a lot of stuffing envelopes. I mean, that's pretty much my whole first 2 jobs was doing that, was stuffing envelopes. Number three, and this is for Jaheim. I would ask him, like, how did I get here? What sacrifice did I have to make, and how does he feel about my like how do I feel about my career now? Well, like as I mentioned, I was a journalist first. Being a journalist was a lot of fun, and but the great thing about being a journalist was that I got to know a lot of publicists. I got to understand what their job was. I got to understand what they did and how they had to write a press release. I would read all the press releases. I'd read the bio materials. I would get their phone calls because they would pitch me all the time. Publicist's job is a lot of people think that publicist's job is putting out press releases and hanging out at concerts. I mean, sure, that's part of it, but there's a lot more to the job than just that. Um, and and like you know and like it was I can't really stress being like stress enough being I guess out there and creative and letting people know who you are. When I was a journalist, one of the things that I did, which ultimately became my way of getting into the music industry, was to kind of make myself known. As a journalist, I had to talk to publicists all the time. They would pitch me their stories, their bands, and say, "Hey, Ray, I have a new band to tell you about. Can you write about them?" And I would actually sit there and talk to the publicists, and they would tell me about the band. And after a while, after talking to them, you build a relationship. And I was a journalist for from roughly around 1991 to 95. So I had about 4 years of getting to know these publicists and building this friendship, this real relationship with them. And they helped me because they knew who I was, because I'd made my mark, because I made myself memorable by talking to them all the time. They helped me get into the industry. And it's a lot of times the way you get into the industry isn't necessarily how good your resume looks, but it's also who you know and how they know you. And I mentioned because I knew so many people, there were so many people who were willing to help me get into the industry. So if I can actually say something here, internships are really important. If you can get an internship if you want to become a publicist, get an internship with a PR firm. Get to get an internship with a newspaper or a magazine, and that way you're in the midst of everybody and everything. You get to know people, you get to meet them, you get to know what their jobs are and how they act, and how they interact. A lot of the job as a publicist is to be communicative, talking to journalists, talking to the artist, talking to managers, and really being able to tell a story and to make it coherent and more importantly, make people want to write about you, and write about your artists. And how do I feel about my career now? I love it. I love being a publicist. I've been a publicist now for a long time, 25 years. 1995 is when I started, so I've been a publicist for 25 years, and I still have a lot of fun. I still enjoy it, and there's a lot of hard work that's involved, but it's a lot of creative work, and I have to say, I'm really happy. I'm incredibly happy. I'm listening to music constantly. I am going to concerts constantly. I am talking to people. I'm very much an extrovert, and I'm communicating, building relationships with a lot of different people, and I get paid for it. Not that many jobs have you get paid for working and listen to music and working with musicians and working with artists, and it's great. Okay. Let's see. I have. Were you nervous to start your own venture? And this is from Teniola and Timmy, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing names incorrectly. Um, I I am terrible about name pronunciation, so sorry. um, I was terrified of starting my own company. Like I was working for a lot of different record labels. I worked for Island Records, Island Def Jam, and some of my clients there were Mariah Carey. Whereas like Janet Jackson, I worked with. I worked with Ja Rule and Cisco, and you all know the I hope you all know the Thong song. Um, I worked with Jay Z um, and Hanson and artists like that, and when you work for that, you're getting paid a lot of money. When I was working for a record label, I was getting paid a lot of money to work with a lot of big artists, and then like the last and that was the last job I had. I was not to kind of brag here or anything, but like I was making close to like $180,000 a year at that job, and I knew that to start my own company, I would I would take a major pay cut, make a percentage of how much I was making at the record label, and the problem is that when you go out on your own, every decision you make and every mistake you make falls on you. This was my reputation. This is I was making I was working for record labels for a long time, and like and I could always blame the label. Like if something came, like if there was a mistake or a screw up, it was the label's fault. But starting my own company, this was my fault. This was all on me, and that's the hard part. And I was terrified. And at first, maybe the first 2 or 3 months, I had maybe 2 or 3 clients, and one was a punk band called Lost City Angels, and I can't remember who the other 2 clients were, but I worked my butt off, and I made a name for myself. A lot of people knew me prior because of being at like Island Records and Jive Records and different record labels and things like that, but and so there's a lot. I had a lot of goodwill from a lot of journalists who want to work with me, but yeah, this was all on me. So yeah, I was terrified. Um, from Jamal, how does it feel to be part of the music industry? Well, this is a tough question. When I first got into the music industry back in '95, the music industry was great. I mean, it was thriving. Bands were blowing up. There was records were going platinum. I had car service everywhere. I had the music industry was a really exciting place to be. And over the years, the music industry's changed. When with peer-to-peer and music piracy and music being put out on the internet for people just to download for free, that changed the music industry considerably. It was tough. It was actually a lot of it was a very tough time because because artists were back then were making a lot of money, and then all of a sudden, almost overnight, um, records stopped selling, and musicians started to realize that they were no longer going to be making a lot of money, and it was everybody had to change the way that they did things. Layoffs. A lot of people got laid off from the record labels. I had a lot of friends who lost their jobs and are now doing like real estate um, or other things like completely out of the music industry. I've been lucky, and and I got to say that I really enjoy being part of it now. I mean, it's tough, especially with coronavirus and COVID-19, where all these all these bands, their tours are being canceled, and campaigns need to be shifted and changed, because no one's going into record stores and buying records anymore. No one's going out and seeing concerts anymore. TV shows that had late night performances of bands aren't happening anymore. So it's terrifying. Like a lot of bands are losing a lot of money because they would make a lot of money from being on tour, and now that's not possible. So, but me personally, I still really enjoy it. Being part of the music industry is a lot of fun. it's tough. I mean, it really is a lot. It's challenging, um, but it's music, you know, and it's really enjoyable to be able to sit there and be able to work within the music world because you know as me like I love music. I still listen to music all the time, and like you know and being part of that is really exciting for me. Um, let's see. How do you publicize a song, and what if a song you are promoting is not a type of song that you seem to get? Thankfully, now since I call the shots, I love all the music that I'm working with. But when I worked for record labels, I was forced to work with bands that I did not like, I did not enjoy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a band called Insane Clown Posse, but they're this rap metal band that wear clown makeup and sing songs that are kind of, I mean, in my opinion, they're kind of terrible. But um, I had to work with them. My boss said to me, "Hey, here's a band. This is a band that you need to work with." So I didn't like the music. I didn't really enjoy the music. I don't like rap metal. I love rap, and I like you know, I like heavy metal. But when you put the two together, it's not something that I really enjoy. Um, and and so what I ended up doing was I ended up asking the band, talking to the band themselves, and finding out who they are and what they're all about and why they write the music that they write, and I actually got a really great story from them. You know, like they wrote music because they wanted to make people feel good. They wanted to make people laugh. They wanted to make people dance and do that, you know, that stupid bro dance they do at Insane Clown Posse shows. Um, and so I got their side of the story. And then the other part, like what I started doing was I started going to their concerts and talking to their fans and saying to like, you know, asking them like, you know, hey, you know, like I know that you really like this band. Why do you like them? What, you know, what is the appeal for you? And some of the kids were telling me that they liked the band because they liked the fact that it was rebellious. You know, they could play this music that their parents didn't like. That they loved the music for how aggressive it was and how like you know they could actually they when they danced, when they moshed, when they stage dove, when they did like you know they when they slam danced and things like that. It released a lot of energy, and they liked that. They loved that feeling of release, and that was actually really exciting for them. Um, and when I kind of learned that why people like the music and why the band was actually writing this music, I was able to understand it myself. I still don't like the music. I didn't like the music then either, but I understood why people liked it, and I understood why they liked it, and so or they wrote it, I should say, and when I figured that out, I was actually able to talk about it, and I was able to call journalists and say, hey, this isn't my thing, but it might be your thing, and if it's not your thing, this is why the kids love it. This is why you should write about it. This is why, if you write the story, a lot of people are going to read your story because they have a lot of fans, um, and that's essentially what it is. I mean, it sounds, you know, like I don't really work with like these days. I don't really work with bands that I don't like, because it's so much easier to work with something that you enjoy, and work with music that you really do like, and if I don't like the music, it makes it harder for me to push it, to promote it, and a lot of times like I don't really have a really great poker face. So if I'm sitting there talking to somebody about a band that I don't like, they're going to be able to read it. You know, they're going to be able to say like, you know, hey, I know that you don't like this band. Why are you pushing this on me? So I choose not to do it. You know, I choose not to work with bands that I don't like, and but I will be honest and say sometimes there have been bands that whose music I may not like, especially when it comes to country. I don't really like country that much. But if the band has a really great story and it's something that I think that I could actually help publicize and I can actually turn into something that people will like, you know, I'll do it. You know, I will actually I'll work with the project. If it's something that I believe in, I could go beyond the music and be able to call a journalist and say, you know, hey Gary, this is a project that this is a band that you know, the music may not be all that exciting, may not all be that great, but let me tell you the story. You know, here's a guy who here's a guy who suffered from depression and a mental illness, and he decided to take that music, or take the music within his head, and create music, and like, and here's that album, and it may not be something that you like, it may not be something that I like, but this is his outlet. This is why it's exciting. This is why people like this. I mean, this is why you need to like it. This is why you need to promote it, because he needs to get his story out there, and then people will hear that excitement in my voice, and they'll understand, that, yeah, this is something that is worthy of my attention, and they'll write about it. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to work with something that you don't like, but when you know the story, and you know the reason why they're putting it out there, and you find out from the fans themselves why they like the music, it's easier to put it all in perspective and be able to promote something like that. This is from Brianna. Do you ever feel like you've made the wrong move or put the wrong thing out when being a publicist for your artist? Does it scare you of the possibility of mistakes and putting the wrong thing out in the public? It Yeah. The answer is definitely yes. Have I put the wrong thing out there? I can be honest and say not no. I've never actually, to my knowledge, I have not put out a press release or something that I did not believe in. And I've actually quit projects when I didn't believe in the artist or the message they were getting out, and the narrative that they chose to put out there. Because if I don't believe it, if I don't understand it, if I don't have faith in it, I don't want to push that story out there. But does it scare me, the possibility of making mistakes? Definitely. Here's an example of something that happened just maybe about a month ago, 3 weeks ago. It had happened during this coronavirus thing. I work with Gloria Gaynor, and if you don't know who she is an international superstar. She had a humongous hit that I'm sure, if you don't know, your parents or your aunt or uncles or your grandparents know. It's a song called "I Will Survive," and it's been an anthem, for a disco anthem, since the '70s. And one of the things that Gloria wanted to do was she wanted to reach she wanted to reach her audience about being safe and taking precautions within this pandemic, And one of the things she wanted to do was do a hand washing video. The whole thing about washing your hands for 20 seconds, making sure you wash it properly, was such a big thing. And so with her song "I Will Survive," I mean, it's all about surviving, obviously, and with this pandemic, you want to survive. So she thought, this is a perfect way to mesh the two: her song, her hit song, but also hand washing. And the chorus of the song is thankfully 20 seconds long, enough time for you to wash your hands. And she's already a big star on TikTok. There's a challenge called #IWillSurvive challenge that even my nephew has done before he even knew that I was working with Gloria Gaynor. But what she did was she wanted to reach those people who did the TikTok challenge. The TikTok challenge has been done for over 1 million. I want to say even millions of people, in which people would lip sync her song and put it up on TikTok. And so what she did was she filmed a video of herself washing her hands, singing the song, and she used the #IWillSurvive challenge. And we put it, she said, she got the team together and she said, "Hey, I have this great idea, I have this video. What do you think of this?" And my immediate thought was, the timing might be wrong. This pandemic is just starting to get out here. People are getting really sick. I don't want to capitalize on a pandemic, and people might think that this is in bad taste. So we talked about it. Her management, me, and her her marketing guy at the record label. We talked about it for almost a day. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking to people for about 3-4 hours at a time, it's a long time. But we talked about it, and we came up with a really good campaign in which we were gonna let we were gonna have her post the video up on TikTok. You let it sit for about 24 hours. We wanted her to reach her fans first, and then see how it did. If it went viral, then I would have something to talk about. I'd have a story to tell, journalists, hey, Gloria Gaynor really wants to help her fans, and she did this challenge, and look at it, it's exploded. It's become viral, and thankfully, 24 hours it did just that. It went big. Um, so I took that story and I was able to transform it from feeling like I was ambulance chasing and wanting to capitalize on Gloria's fame, um, by jumping on the bandwagon and capitalizing on hand washing. It sounds so gross um, and wrong, but our hearts were in the right place. We and Gloria wanted to do it to help her audience, and she wanted to save lives, and we put it out there, and I can't even tell you, the sigh of relief when it was being talked about by on CNN. Good Day New York did a story on it. Good Morning America, Today Show, Time Magazine, New York Times. It went. Everyone started talking about it, and the video itself went viral. It's now at a few million, and it's a perfect example of being able to take marketing, publicity, and intent and merge it and put it all together to do the right thing, and that's that's at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. And this might go back to the story before, a question I answered before, but if I don't believe in something, if I don't fully feel that this is something that the message isn't genuine, I'm not going to do it. And this is something that I really believed in, and I thought that it could save lives. And in the end, even if it just saved one life, it was success. Thankfully, it's out there, and it's gone multi-million views and all that stuff, and it's reaching everybody. So it was great. So it's terrifying to put something out there that might not connect. Thankfully, I have not been involved in anything that's gone haywire. I've fixed things, but I've never put some news out there that was ultimately the wrong choice. You know. Let's see. What's the most important task a publicist is tasked with when taking on a new client? That's a fun question, actually, because the most important thing for a publicist to do is to get to know their client. No, I don't want to say become friends with them. I become friends with almost all of my clients. And because what I want to do is I want to know what their story is. I want to know what their narrative is, what they want to get out to their fans, what they want to tell their fans, what they want to tell about themselves. If they had something that was really, that may have happened to them in their childhood that they want to get out there and maybe help other people. Getting that narrative out there is important, and there's a lot of artists who become artists because of maybe a past traumatic experience, or maybe they became stars and now they have a platform in which they want to get their story out. For example, I won't mention any names, but there was an artist that I had who was abused as a child, and she suffered from a very violently abusive mother, and she channeled a lot of that energy and a lot of that pain and that frustration into songwriting, and some of it, and at first she didn't tell the story. She got out there, she became really popular. Her story got really big. Her songs were getting played. Not her story, but her songs were getting played on the radio, and people started talking about her. And the more I got to know her, the more I realized that, she was hiding something, and she wanted to talk to people. She wanted to get the word out. I don't want to say hiding. She was kind of repressing something. And one night when we were talking, she and I were on the phone, and she said to me, she's like, Ray, I have been going to therapy for since I was a child, and the source of all of a lot of these songs is from a very painful part of my life, and she's like, and she said to me that she wants to be able to let people, like, let her fans know that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to to maybe feel like this pain that's out there. But the most important thing is to get help and really take that, like, seek professional help. Talk to, like, a therapist or a counselor or something like that. Like if you yourself have been subject to abuse or even emotional abuse, verbal abuse, what have you, it's okay to talk to somebody about it. And so we talked about it, and I helped her discuss it and really kind of come up with a few different ideas and ways of getting her story out there. And we got it out there, and she is she was able to really help a lot of people. The story, like the messages she gets, the emails that she gets are from fans who say that she heard her story. She read a story of hers in some magazine, and this fan related to it, and it helped them come to grips with what they were going through, what they've gone through, and like and she, like, she herself feels that she's reached her fans, and she's putting out great, like, I don't want to say great, but, like, she's putting out a message to her fans that it's okay. She's there for them, and and she's made it through, and they can too. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And that's, like, that's actually been I mean, that's, I like, I love that. Being able to get artist stories out there, and it may not be as impactful as that. It might be something as simple as, like, hey, I'm an artist, and like, I love writing songs, and being able to help those artists, like, those musicians, tell their story is a really great thing, you know. So this, let's see, this next question: in this whole situation with the virus, what is your biggest fear? Um, my personal biggest fear is not having a job. It's a fear of a lot of people. Music industry is cratering right now. It's falling apart. I was just reading an article in Polestar just the other day. I think it was on Friday night, that said, because of all these tours that are being canceled, the music industry is going to be losing upwards of $9 billion, which means a lot of musicians and a lot of bands and everything like that are going to be losing money. And when you look at the fact that $9 billion is going to be lost because of coronavirus, because of COVID-19, it's scary. The industry is falling apart, and like everybody is scared of bands not having not having careers after this, and that's a fear of mine too. Not being able to work with bands and not being able to help bands, um, it sounds corny, but achieve their dreams, and that scares me. My whole goal is to really help artists tell their stories and get their music out there. Um, so he's from Aisha. What's the favorite part of your career, and what has been the biggest challenge in your career so far? I think that goes hand in hand with the question I answered earlier. My favorite part of the career is actually helping artists tell their stories. Getting their stories out there, and and kind of making, like, seeing them become successful. I've seen a lot of musicians be huge. I was Britney Spears' publicist from the very beginning. I watched her go from a musician that nobody heard of. I mean, she was on the Mickey Mouse Club, but nobody knew her as a musician, and who sold 0 records to selling 16 million albums. I worked with an artist named Macy Gray, who, the same story. Nobody knew who she was, and all of a sudden, bam, she got huge. And there's nothing more exciting than be knowing that I am helping people achieve their dreams. You know, a few of my favorite parts of being in the music industry, of being a publicist, is like, one of them just happened recently at the Grammys. Gloria Gaynor won a Grammy for Best Roots Gospel Album for her album Testimony, and in her speech she thanked me. It was it was a blink and you miss it kind of moment, but she said she wanted to thank her publicist, Ray, for helping her, and hearing her say that was a thrill for me. That was like my favorite. That was like one of my favorite parts of being in the industry. Another one is actually going on stage, watching one of my bands um, who I helped from the very beginning, and seeing them play to thousands of people. And I saw that with Britney. I've seen that with a band called Yellow Card, with seeing it with Macy Gray, as I mentioned. It's a thrilling experience. Or being like helping an artist write a song. We'll be sitting there I remember talking to this band Hoobastank. You guys probably don't know them, but there's a band called Hoobastank, and we were on the tour bus one day while we were on tour, and they were writing a song, like a really corny love song, and we were laughing about it because we kept on thinking, like, what are the corniest lyrics we can write, and what song, and we kept on laughing about wanting the song to be a prom theme, and it became a song called "The Reason," and I remember being on the tour bus saying, if we're gonna call the song "The Reason," why the chorus should be, "And the reason is you," so that somebody could sing it to their loved one or their date or something, and like that will totally make everybody fall in love with the song. It'll be a song for weddings. It'll be a song for proms. It'll be the slow song at at a school dance. And 2 years later, that's what happened. The song became like the biggest prom song in the world. This was probably, I don't even remember, around like 99, maybe, around that time, and it was huge. It was huge, and that was actually a lot of fun. Challenge. The biggest challenge is working with an artist who nobody knows, and trying to figure out how to make them, how to get people to like their music, um, and knowing that you have an artist who, again, nobody knows, and being able to get people to write about them is a challenge. Getting people to think that the song that you're working is the greatest song in the world, and have them believe it, have a journalist believe that enough that they're going to write about this artist is a challenge. It's and I'm somebody who loves challenges. So when I'm working with an artist that nobody knows, that is completely brand new, I love being able to take that challenge. I'm up for it. Give me an artist that no one's ever heard of, and my goal is going to be to make that person a star. And it's great. It's awesome. That's just getting long. I'm sorry, you guys. This is like 43 minutes long so far. So this question is: what advice would you give someone who wanted to join the music industry but is shy? Um, that's a tough one. As you can tell, I'm not very shy, and but I can be, and I think the best thing to do, the great thing about the music industry right now, is that you don't have to be in front of people. You don't have to go out and meet people face to face. A lot of the job is done through the internet, emails, phone calls. Not phone calls, not so much, but emailing people is a new way of pitching, and not really new, but I mean it's the way we pitch people these days. And you could be really shy, and if you could actually, but if you're creative, and you could write a really great pitch, if you could write, and let me backtrack a little bit in case you aren't familiar with what a pitch is, but the way that I describe a pitch is pretend the journalist is your best friend, and you have this song that you really really love, or you have this artist that you love the story, and you want to turn your friend onto that artist, or that song. What are you going to say about it? What are you going to say about the song? What are you going to say about this artist? How are you going to get your best friend to listen to this song that you really really love? How are you going to get them to want to know about this artist, and want to read about them, and you want your friend to become fans of that artist? What are you going to say? What are you going to write? What are you going to What are you going to tell them? And that's what a pitch is. The pitch is a letter, an email, or a phone call to a journalist, in which you're trying to get them to love what you're pitching, to get them to love the song, or to want to pay attention to this artist. I mean, people always say, like, with me, one of the things that they say about me is that I'm such a successful publicist that, and it's an old cliche, but I could sell ice to an Eskimo, because I could actually talk to somebody and have them love a song that I'm working. I could actually talk to somebody just for a few times, just for like a few minutes, and have them get so excited about the song that I'm telling them about. They may not even heard the song yet, but because I could sit there and talk to them and say, like, oh, this is a really great song. Here's why. This is why you need to listen to it. It's such a great song. That they'll want to listen to it. They'll want to hear it. They'll want to understand it. They'll want to know more about this artist, and they'll want to write about it. And so I think if you're shy, you can become a publicist. You can get into the music industry, because again, a lot of it is done on the internet. So you don't even have to confront people, or not confront people, but you don't have to talk to people face to face. And as long as you could actually communicate well through email, you could do it. But I will say that one of the best parts of the job, one of the parts that I love about the job, is getting to know the artist, hanging out with them, being on the tour bus, being backstage at concerts, and like getting to know journalists, and building a friendship, building a really strong relationship with them, and getting to know them, because it's a great part of the job. And and a lot of friends of mine who were shy getting in the music industry, the more they got comfortable and got to know what the job is, the more they were able to overcome that shyness and really put themselves out there, and get to know their artists, and really and really shine, and it's a fun job, it's a really fun job. And I think if you're shy, again, and if you're shy and creative, and you can actually do this job by just being a compelling email writer, and you can do it. You can totally do it. Let's see. Destiny and Daniel are asking me, why did you choose some of the artists you did, like Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys? Okay, well, Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears were artists that I had to work with because I was at Jive Records. I was the publicist for Jive Records, and when you work for a company, when you work for a record label, you don't get to choose the artists that you're working. They give them to you. So, for example, with Britney, Britney was only 15 years old when I first started working with her, and Baby One More Time was still a year off in a year off in the future, and the president of the record label, Barry Weiss, said to me, he said to me and my team, basically, we have this girl. She was on the Mickey Mouse Club. What can you do with her? And it wasn't a choice for me. I had to. He assigned me Britney, and I had to work with Britney. So, so I decided, I wanted to figure out how to turn this 15-year-old girl into a superstar. And back then, there was no Christina Aguilera, there was no Mandy Moore, there was no Avril Lavigne or any of those artists. Britney Spears was the very first solo teen pop star. I mean, years before that, they had you had Debbie Gibson and Tiffany and artists like that. But Britney was essentially the first one to come out. At that time, Backstreet Boys were already huge, and the Spice Girls were huge. And there wasn't any solo male stars except for maybe Michael Jackson. You had a few artists like that, but nobody who was a teenager. And So we decided we were going to take Britney and I like there was a few of us who sat there and said, let's put her through the malls. Let's do a mall campaign. Let's have her talk to teenage girls, girls her own age, and talk to them and watch her perform in malls and everything like that. And that's what we did. We would bring Brittany. We would set up a performance at a mall, and she would go to a mall in the main, maybe sometimes a food court or maybe the center of the mall. We'd set up a stage and invite all parents and their kids to come see this singing sensation. And she would perform three songs, and then she would sign autographs. We'd give out free photos of Brittany, and she would sign autographs. And that built her fan base, and so by the time a year later, when we were about to launch Baby One More Time, she already had a fan base of teenage girls who had met her, had loved her, had her autograph photo on the wall, had pictures with her, and that blew her up. And so to answer the question, I didn't choose her. I was given her. But if you want to kind of talk about, now with my own company, how I choose the artists that I work, I actually will listen to the band. I'll listen to the music. And a lot of times what I'll do is if let's say a manager or a record label or somebody, or the artist themselves, says, hey, I have a song, I would love for you to be my publicist, I'd love for you to check this out. I will listen to the song. I'll listen to it about 3 times, and if it connects with me, if I like it, I'll want to hear more about it. I want to hear more about the artist. I want to know what their story is. I want to hear more about the music, what they're doing, and if I like more music, then I'll actually I'll talk to the artists themselves and find out what they're all about, and then I'll have my staff listen to it, and if they like it, then I know it's a good song. Because sometimes, I may think that a song is good, but it may not be, and but also I'll make sure that for my staff, if they like it, it's something that we should take on, and if 2 or more of my staffers like a song or like an artist, then we'll sign them to my company. Let's see. We have a question. How should someone promote their own music and gain connections in the music industry? Promoting their own music, if you have a song that you want to get heard, send it to a friend of you, get to know some journalists, send it to friends of yours. I would say, it's tough. I mean, it's tough and it's also easy right now. Do a lot of reading, read a lot of blogs, go to Hype Machine. I think the URL is hypem.com, HYPEM, the letter M as in Mary.com. And that's an aggregate of blogs, and a lot of blogs are on there. Read a lot of those blogs, see what some of these writers are writing about, and compare them to your own music, and find the right blogs that you think your music fits into. And get the contact information. I think with a lot of blogs on Hype Machine, it's called Hype Machine, but Hype M, you have to submit your songs through this thing called Submit Hub. And so if you really want to get your song out there, find a few of these blogs that you think your music fits into, and submit it through, find out go to submithub.com and find out the process to submit your songs, and submit them. Send them to these blogs, and who knows? Somebody might like it. Somebody might want to write about it, and if they don't get discouraged. It just means that there's a person out there who doesn't get what you want to do, and it's their loss, And seriously, I believe that. Just keep on reading. Keep on getting to know what blogs and what writers are writing about, and find those people. Let's say you think your music sounds like Dua Lipa, do a search on Dua Lipa, find the reviews of the, find reviews on Dua Lipa. Take note of the review editor or the review writer's name, and like, send them an email. Send these people an email and say, hey, I noticed that you liked Dua Lipa. Like, would love for you to check out my song. And if you're interested, like, respond. Let me know. And then you can, like, who knows? Somebody might discover you and might think, like, this is great, and like, and want to become your cheerleader. Um, and I guess the other part of that question is, um, what was that other question? And gain connections in the music industry. Well, gaining connections in the music industry is a different question altogether. A lot of that, if we were talking about the music industry, like, people at the record labels, other publicists and things like that, in that part of the industry, get to know them. Internships are important. If you get an internship with a PR firm, you'll get to know publicists, you'll get to know like, artists, and you'll get to know managers, because managers are the ones who do the most talking to the publicists. And that's a good way to doing it. Another, like, people within the industry, if you're talking about journalists and things like that, read a lot of blogs, read magazines, read sites like RollingStone.com, and get to know which writers that you trust, which writers that you really love. And like, it can't hurt to write to these people, find their email, or Twitter, and send them send them a tweet, send them an email, and say, hey, I loved your review on I don't know, on the Weeknd's latest album, and I thought that was really insightful. I loved what you said. And sometimes they may respond back to you, and like, and sometimes, like, sometimes they won't, but sometimes you might be able to build a relationship from that. And it's like, and music industry is kind of scattered right now, and I think, like, if you're serious about getting in the music industry, it's like, internships are important, because you get to learn what the craft is, and you also learn whether or not you want to do it. I've had interns who thought they wanted to be a publicist, and after working with me for a few months, they realized, hey, publicity is cool, but it's not for me. Maybe I should go into radio, or maybe I should go into advertising, or A&R or something. But when you have an internship, that is a way to meet people, and these people could be very helpful. That's how I got in the industry, because I knew people. I got to meet them through being a journalist, and that ultimately helped me find my job. Let's see. This is from Lizbeth. How do you generate or manage the publicity for your artists, and what artists have you worked with? That's a very involved question, and one that might take a lot longer to be able to answer. Publicity is about learning about the artist, learning about what their story is and their narrative, and learning how to put that into a strategy, how to put that into a campaign, and a lot of it is about writing. Writing a press release is really important. Being able to talk and being able to pitch properly is really important. And what I do is, like, just a quick one. If, let's say, like, somebody gave me a single and said, hey, Ray, I want you to do this, let's promote this single. What I would do is I would actually listen to the song, get to know it really, really well, listen to maybe a dozen times, maybe half a dozen, 2 dozen times if I have to. And find out what from the artist the story is, find out what the narrative is, and really kind of understand about what makes them tick and why they wrote this song, and then I put that into a press release and I send it out to journalists, and then once I send out the press release, they read it, and then I call them up or I'll email them and say, hey Dom over at Prelude Press, this song, this artist that I'm working with, Julia Bott, just released a single. I just sent you a press release about it. What do you think about it? And I get their opinions. If they like it, say, hey, she's available for an interview. Why don't you talk to her? She's a really great person to talk to. She's got a really great personality and a really great story. You should talk to her. And you take it from there. It's a very involved process. Publicity is a lot deeper than that. But that's in a nutshell, I guess. And what artists have I worked with? I've worked with everybody. I've worked with Diana Ross. I've worked with Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys. I've worked with Duran Duran. I've worked with Dashboard Confessional. I've worked with I don't know, Blue October, Bauhaus. I worked with the NSYNC. I worked with a lot of different artists. I'm currently working with, as I mentioned, Gloria Gaynor. Your grandparents may know Engelbert Humperdinck. I've done films too. Like there was there's a blockbuster called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon that I was involved in. I've also worked with another film that George Clooney was in called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," and Bridget Jones's Diary. But I've worked with if you're really curious, you can go to my website reybe.com, reybee.com, and click on the About tab, and it lists I would say almost maybe 400 different artists I've worked with. Actually, maybe not, maybe 300 artists that I've worked with. But I've worked with so many different artists. That was just a few that I named. Okay, this is from Brian. What are some of the difficulties of working in the music business? Music business changes all the time. Like back when I first started, we were still working with CDs and vinyl albums and even cassettes at that time. And and since then, the music industry has changed from that to MP3s and Flax and Spotify. The hardest part is being able to adapt and evolve. I have a lot of friends who started out in the music industry at the same time I did, and they're not in the music industry anymore. I would actually even say maybe 70-80% of the people that I started out in the music industry aren't in the music industry anymore because they couldn't adapt. Because it's hard to figure it out. It's hard to when you get older to really understand what the kids really like. It's hard to really put yourself in that mindset when you're like 30, 40, 50 years old and understand what somebody who is 16 years old likes. And the way that I do that is I talk to my nephews and nieces. I go to concerts. I was going to Warped Tour, maybe 10 years in a row, just so at least I could see the emo that kids were listening to and really understand what was out there. I listened to the radio and find out what's pop, what the big the latest pop music is, and it's all about adapting and all about being able to change and really become somebody who knows how to talk to people of all different ages. I mean, my oldest artist right now is Engelbert Humperdinck. He's in his 80s, and the people that I'm talking to who are his fans are 70 years old, 60 years old, or some of them are even 80 years old. And I got to be able to talk to those people and talk to them in a way that they trust me and they don't think that I'm trying to sell them this artist, that I actually understand the artist. At the same time, I'm working an artist called Eliza and the Delusionals, brand new artist from Australia, and I think she's not even she's in her early 20s maybe, and being able to talk to her fans who are the same age and sometimes even younger, and be able to say hey, Eliza is this this really cool rock chick who's he plays guitar and she writes these songs that are really awesome, and talking in the same way that that they'll understand. At the same time, I'm also working members of the Wu-Tang Clan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Wu-Tang Clan, but I'm working with their kids. It's called Second Generation Wu-Tang. Hold on a second. I need some drink. That's coffee, by the way. Coffee is the fuel that keeps me going. I'll have maybe 10 cups of coffee a day, because the caffeine is just something that keeps me really energetic. But anyway, with the Wu-Tang Clan, the name of the band is Second Generation Wu, and they're a hip hop band. They're rappers, and being able to understand the music, being able to understand why they're writing what they're doing, and being able to transcend that their message and their ideas of living out in Staten Island and coming from this, like, coming from that environment and being able to translate that to um, a writer who lives in Wisconsin, for example, and say, like, hey, like, I'm working second generation Wu. The song 7OD is completely in the same vein as Wu-Tang Clan's Cream, and being able to talk about the art, like, about the music in that realm, in that genre, without feeling like I'm a fish out of water, without feeling like, I am completely out of my element, is a challenge. It's really difficult. Sometimes being able to talk about second generation Wu and about rap 1 second, and then switching gears, and then being able to talk about I don't know, let's see, talking about, like, this band Best X, who, like, is this indie pop artist, and switch, like, being able to kind of talk about rap in 1 minute and then talk about indie pop the next minute, it's difficult, but, the best publicists are able to do that, and that's a challenge. Being able to feel like you're trustworthy, and people understand you, people like you, people are going to trust what you have to tell them about the music, and trust your judgment. You know. Okay, this is from Christina. Christina, how did the Backstreet Boys name come into place? There is, well, I mean, it's a really simple story. They're, like, the band's from Florida. They were signed to a record, like, a management slash record label called Transcontinental Records. Like, the owner of it is a guy named Louis Pearlman, Lou Pearlman, who is in jail. I believe he passed away not that long ago, but he had the Backstreet Boys before Jive Records did, and I was at Jive Records, and I was their publicist there at that label. But Backstreet Boys got their name from an open air market. I don't think it was open air market, but a marketplace. It was called Backstreet Marketplace. And it was in Central Florida, and they used to hang out there, or at least that's the rumor. And they got the name from Backstreet Marketplace. That's where the Backstreet Boys name came from. And finally, this is a story, like a question from, and forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, Chioma. I would ask Ray about his experience with top artists, a couple of insights in their private life. Are they really as stuck up as the media portrays them? Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, well, it's just because I've been talking about her a lot. Let's talk about Britney. Britney Spears. So, Britney Spears is, when I first started working with her, she was really sweet. She was a really, really fun teenager. Like, she loved her girly girl things like makeup and clothing and ponytails and things like that. And as she got more and more popular, she started to buy into the hype, her own hype. People would sit there and, like, say, like, tell her how much they love her, she's a star, blah, blah, blah. But she never really got stuck up. Even to this day, like, I haven't talked to her in maybe a little while, but I'm not going to lie and say that she's not spoiled, because when you're given that much money, I mean, she's a multi-millionaire. And she was a millionaire when she was young, like when she was younger. Like, she stuck up is I wouldn't really call her stuck up at all. And she's afforded all the luxuries of being a celebrity, but yeah, I mean, she's still sweet. She's still nice. Like, when last time I talked to her, we had a very nice conversation, fun conversation. But yeah, she's not that stuck up, and that's one thing I love about a lot of musicians. There's an artist that I work with. His name is Peter Murphy. He's in a band that I loved as a kid called Bauhaus. It's spelled Bauhaus. They're the biggest goth band out there, and if you don't know goth music, it's the music that, like, the people who wear black, and they have black eyeliner and the crazy hair and all that kind of stuff. It's the music that they listen to. It's like, Marilyn Manson, maybe a little darker. And Peter Murphy was somebody who I always thought would be really scary, because he is a scary, he's a scary person on stage. His music is dark. It's um, he like he has his song called Stigmata Martyr that I would play as a kid. That sounds like like a kid possessed by the devil and like chanting these Latin phrases and being very scary. Um, and I was scared of him. I was and when I started working with him, um, this was only about like 5 years ago. And mind you, I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I was scared of meeting Peter Murphy. And because one thing, he was a hero of mine. He was a personal hero of mine, and I was expecting him to be like mean. I was expecting him to be like really difficult, but he was lovely. I mean, when I first when he invited me backstage, um, he came up to me and he said to me, he's like, tell me about Ray, and I want to know all about you, and it caught me by surprise because you automatically think, these stars want to talk about themselves, or they want you to sit there and tell them how great they are, but meanwhile Peter wanted to know who I was, and he and I become good friends, like we talk quite often. We talk about random things. We talk about, we were like the last conversation I had with him is that we were talking about how this whole COVID-19 coronavirus business is actually a good thing for pollution and everything because um, people aren't out there polluting, aren't driving that much, so the air is getting cleaner. Like there's been stories about the canals in Venice, how the waters are clearer, things like that. That was our conversation. And he's not stuck up. He's not. He when he gets into character, he becomes this elderly statesman. But he's just Peter. Um, I will say that there are artists who are stuck up. Backstreet Boys. Love you guys to death, but you know, um, they buy into their own hype. And I mean, not these days. I haven't seen them in a long time, but I remember working with them. They were difficult. They knew they were stars, and they held themselves up like that. But deep inside though, they are good guys. And um, but I would say 90% of the artists that are out there aren't stuck up. They're people. They're normal people like you and me. When you close the door, when you close the door and you don't have the cameras around and don't have outside people there, it's just you and the artist. You get to know them really well and become really good friends with them. So some of my artists, I can honestly say, are really good friends of mine. They're good people, and even somebody like Sting. When I worked with Sting for a long time, worldwide superstar. He's sells out stadiums, so he's massive. But he's a great guy. We'll have coffee together and we'll talk, and he's awesome. People like Pink, she's great. Christina Aguilera used to hate me because I was working with Britney and there was a huge competition between Christina and Britney, but I've seen her since, and she's she's a really sweet woman. Um, so yeah, I mean they're not as stuck up as the media portrays them. A lot of times one thing you got to remember is the media loves controversy. They love to be provocative. They love to kind of create tension, and they love to actually be I don't know. They love big stories, um, and the thing about it is that sometimes they'll make them seem difficult. Like TMZ makes them seem difficult. And that's the thing. One thing you got to remember with stuff like TMZ and things like that, and Perez Hilton, um, they'll sometimes attack, go up to an artist and provoke them when they're coming off the plane or when they're really tired or when they're out eating dinner with their families. And nobody wants to be disturbed while you're eating. Nobody wants to be badgered when you're getting off a plane. So when you see an artist get snappy or anything like that or get mean, it might be because the journalists, because the paparazzi, or because they were confronted at the wrong times. They were confronted when they just want to be left alone. I mean, they're people. They're normal people, and sometimes normal people just want to be alone. So that's that brings us to the end of the questions. But yeah, I mean, I guess like the thing I got to like kind of the thing I want to kind of impart with you guys is that the music industry isn't scary. It is what it is. It's if you want to get into it, it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take a lot of struggle. Um, it's going to be trying at times. I had a lot of difficult times, like when in my trip up, but I stuck with it, and I absolutely loved it. And you gotta love it. Don't get into it for the wrong reasons. Don't get into it because you want to hang out with celebrities. Don't go get into it, especially not for the music. Because like depending upon like what you do in the music industry, the music is like the music is there, but the money may not be. But if success is being happy at your job. And for me, I'm ecstatic. I love my job, and I could talk music all day long, and I have, and I think that's pretty much it. So thanks, guys, for listening. Hope it wasn't too long. I just noticed it's an hour and 15 minutes. Maybe your teacher, like maybe Jackie, will cut this up. But otherwise, that's about it. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon, and hopefully we'll see. I'll see you guys at at the Oscars or at the Grammys.